Racing has always been about pushing limits. Speed, technology, and human courage have driven motorsport forward for over a century. But with that pursuit of speed came a dark reality that many fans don't understand. Some races in history were so dangerous that they literally killed participants and spectators on a regular basis. Today, we're exploring the most dangerous races in car history. These aren't just crash stories. These are stories about how the pursuit of speed created death traps that claimed hundreds of lives before anyone changed the rules. From the early Indianapolis 500 to Group B rally racing, we'll uncover motorsport's deadliest chapters. Let's start with a shocking number. At Indianapolis Motor Speedway alone, 74 people have died in racing incidents since 1909. That's just one facility. When you look at international racing, the numbers become even more staggering. The Isle of Man Tourist Trophy has killed over 270 riders since 1911. That's an average of 2 to 3 deaths every year for more than a century. In 2005 alone, 10 people died during racing events on that tiny island. 10 people died in 1 year at one race. But here's what makes these statistics even more shocking. These weren't freak accidents or one-time tragedies. These were predictable, recurring deaths that everyone in the sport knew were going to happen. The organizers knew it, the drivers knew it, the fans knew it, and they all kept coming back anyway. The early days of American racing were brutal. When the Indianapolis 500 started in 1911, cars were death traps on wheels. They had no safety equipment, no seat belts, and no roll cages. Drivers reasoned that it was better to be thrown clear of a crash than trapped inside a burning car. That logic might sound reasonable until you realize how often drivers were crushed by their own vehicles or thrown into concrete walls at high speed. The first person to die at the Indianapolis 500 was Sam Dixon in 1911. He was a riding mechanic, which was a position that no longer exists in modern racing. Back then, every car had a driver and a mechanic who rode along to make repairs during the race. Dixon was thrown from the car when a wheel came off, and he flew into a fence 20 feet away. Reports say he was killed instantly, but the crowd swarmed around his body so aggressively that security had to use their guns as clubs to clear a path for doctors. The Indianapolis 500 continued killing people year after year. In 1931, 11-year-old Wilbur Brink was killed by a tire that flew out of the track during a crash. He was sitting on an ice chest in his family's front yard across the street when the tire bounced over the fence, over his house, and landed on his head. The crashes weren't just killing drivers and spectators, they were killing entire families. In 1909, during one of the precursor events to the Indianapolis 500, a car flipped into the stands and killed 3 people instantly, including 2 spectators named Omar Jolliffe and James West. The race was abandoned, but only after 235 miles of the 300-mile event had been completed. Even after multiple deaths, the priority was finishing as much of the race as possible. But American racing wasn't the only deadly sport. The Isle of Man Tourist Trophy, which started in 1907, remains the world's most dangerous race. The TT is a motorcycle race on public roads around the Isle of Man, a small island between England and Ireland. The TT course is 37 miles of narrow roads winding through villages, over mountains, and past stone walls, houses, and trees. Riders reach speeds over 200 miles per hour on roads never designed for racing. There are no runoff areas, no safety barriers, and no margin for error. If you crash, you hit something solid, and you probably die. The statistics from the Isle of Man TT are absolutely staggering. Since 1937, there has been only 1 year without a fatality. That was 1982. Every other year for more than 80 years, at least one person has died during the TT or its companion event, the Manx Grand Prix. The deadliest year was 2005, when 10 people died during the racing events. What makes the TT shocking is that everyone knows exactly how dangerous it is. The riders know they might die. The organizers know people will die. The The spectators know they're watching people risk their lives. But the race continues because it's tradition, and traditions are hard to break, even deadly ones. The TT represents something unique in motorsport. It's a race that has remained essentially unchanged since the early 1900s, which means it's preserved all the dangers that other forms of racing have eliminated. Modern Formula One or NASCAR races are incredibly safe compared to their historical counterparts, but the TT is still as dangerous today as it was a century ago. But perhaps no racing was more dangerous than Group B rally in the 1980s. Group B was a category of rally cars designed with minimal restrictions on technology and power. The result was cars that produced over 500 horsepower and weighed less than most modern sedans. They were rocket ships with wheels, driven at maximum speed through forests, over mountains, and past crowds of spectators standing inches from the action. Group B rally was dangerous for everyone involved. The drivers were at risk because the cars were so powerful and so light that they were almost impossible to control when something went wrong. The spectators were at risk because they stood directly on the racing line, often jumping out of the way at the last second as cars flew past at over 100 miles per hour. The end of Group B came in 1986 after two horrific accidents that finally forced racing authorities to admit that the category had become too dangerous to continue. The first accident happened at the Rally Portugal, where driver Joaquim Santos lost control of his Ford RS200 while trying to avoid spectators who were standing on the road. The car crashed into a crowd, killing 3 people and injuring over 30 others. Just days later, at the Tour de Corse in France, Finnish driver Henri Toivonen and his co-driver Sergio Cresto were killed when their Lancia Delta S4 crashed and caught fire. The car was made of lightweight materials that burned so intensely that both men were killed before rescue crews could reach them. The accident was particularly shocking because Toivonen was one of the most talented drivers in the sport, and the crash happened on a relatively simple corner that shouldn't have been dangerous. The deaths of Toivonen and Cresto marked the end of Group B rally racing. The sport's governing body banned the category immediately, recognizing that the cars had become too fast and too dangerous for the courses they were racing on. It was a rare moment in motorsport history when safety concerns actually overruled the desire for speed and spectacle. The 1955 Le Mans disaster remains the deadliest single incident in motorsport history. During the 24 hours of Le Mans race in France, a collision between 3 cars sent one vehicle flying into the spectator area at over 125 miles per hour. The car disintegrated on impact, sending the engine block, radiator, and other heavy components flying into the packed grandstand. At least 82 people were killed, including the driver Pierre Levey, and over 120 others were injured. The death toll might have been even higher, but the exact number was never determined because the scene was so chaotic and the destruction so complete. What made the Le Mans disaster particularly shocking was how it happened. The crash wasn't caused by mechanical failure or driver error in the traditional sense. It was caused by the fundamental design of the track, which hadn't been updated to handle the speeds that cars were reaching by 1955. The crash happened when British driver Mike Hawthorne suddenly slowed down to enter the pits. The driver behind him, Lance Macklin, swerved to avoid a collision and moved directly into the path of Pierre Levey, who was traveling much faster in his Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR. Leveg had no time to react and rear-ended Macklin's car, launching his own vehicle into the air and over a small earthen barrier that was supposed to protect spectators. The Mercedes was made of a lightweight magnesium alloy that burned extremely hot and was almost impossible to extinguish. The fire from the wreckage burned for hours, and the smoke could be seen for miles. The race continued even after the accident, which seems unthinkable today, but was considered normal at the time. The Le Mans disaster had immediate consequences for motorsport around the world. Switzerland banned all forms of motor racing, a ban that wasn't lifted until 2022. Other countries imposed temporary bans or strict new safety regulations. The accident forced the racing world to confront the reality that speeds had increased faster than safety measures, and that spectators were paying the price for that imbalance. These historical tragedies fundamentally changed how we think about racing safety. Modern motorsport bears little resemblance to the deadly spectacles of the early and mid-20th century. Today's Formula One cars have survival cells that can withstand massive impacts. NASCAR has implemented safety innovations like the safer barrier and the hands device that have virtually eliminated fatal crashes. Even the Indianapolis 500, once one of the deadliest races in the world, hasn't had a driver fatality since 1973. But the transformation didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen voluntarily. Every major safety innovation in motorsport was implemented only after a tragedy that could have been prevented. The racing establishment consistently prioritized speed and spectacle over safety until the death toll became too high to ignore. The most recent major safety crisis in American racing was the death of Dan Wheldon in 2011 during an IndyCar race in Las Vegas. Wheldon was killed in a massive crash that involved 15 cars and sent his vehicle flying into the catch fence. The accident led to significant changes in IndyCar safety regulations and track design, proving that even modern racing isn't completely safe. What's remarkable about these dangerous races is how they shape the culture of motorsport. The early racing community developed an acceptance of death that seems shocking by today's standards. Drivers, mechanics, and spectators all understood that people were going to die, and they participated anyway. This wasn't ignorance or recklessness. It was a calculated decision that the excitement and glory of racing was worth the risk of death. That culture persisted for decades and still exists in some forms of racing today. The Isle of Man TT continues to kill riders every year, but it also continues to attract participants who are willing to accept that risk. The race has become a pilgrimage for motorcycle enthusiasts who want to test themselves against the most dangerous course in the world. The legacy of these dangerous races is complex. They represent a dark chapter when human life was considered expendable in pursuing speed and entertainment. But they also drove the technological and safety innovations that make modern racing possible. Every safety device in a modern race car exists because someone died in an accident that could have been prevented. The most important lesson from these dangerous races is that safety isn't automatic. It requires constant vigilance, continuous innovation, and a willingness to prioritize human life over entertainment value. The racing community learned this lesson the hard way, through decades of preventable deaths and avoidable tragedies. Today's racing is safer than ever before, but it's not safe because of luck or natural evolution. It's safe because people died, and their deaths forced the racing world to change. Every time you watch a modern race and see drivers walk away from crashes that would have been fatal 50 years ago, you're seeing the legacy of all the people who died to make that safety possible. The most dangerous races in car history weren't just sporting events. They were laboratories where the limits of human courage and mechanical engineering were tested at the cost of human life. The lessons learned from those deadly experiments continue to save lives today, but they came at a price that seems almost unimaginable by modern standards. Thanks for watching this deep dive into the most dangerous races in car history. If you found this informative, please hit that like button and subscribe for more motorsport content. Racing has come a long way from its deadly beginnings, but understanding that history helps us appreciate how far we've come and how much those early pioneers sacrificed for the sport we love today. Until next time, drive safe and remember that every safety innovation in racing was paid for with someone's life.